Hey guys, this is Patrick Carnes-Sedermoon. You might know me as the guy with the most IM medals in the world, or something like that. I'm also the CGO fanatic, and you're watching Duncan Thorin Shields YouTube channel. Yeah, pleasure being here.
You want to get more out of matches at big tournaments? You can play fantasy esports or bet at esports pools. They even have in-game betting where during a live match you can bet on certain factors. Now, Dreamhack Masters Malmo is using the GSL format, which is essentially just another name for a double elimination group of 4. And the change that they've implemented for this particular edition of the Dreamhack Masters is they've made the winners match, so the match where the 2 first matches, whoever wins that, the winner of this particular game goes straight to the playoffs as the winner of the group. They've made that one of the best of 3s, and the other best of 3 is the decider for the playoffs, which is the final match of the lower bracket part. Now, the opening upper matches and the one lower match between the 2 losing teams of the first matches are the best of 1 games. Now, originally in CS, when we first implemented the GSL system, all of the matches were best of 1s, which for obvious reasons aren't so good. There's a lot more upsets. There's going to be a lot more variance in the results. Then we had the switch that we at least got a best of 3 for the decider match for the playoffs. The team that came out second from the playoffs, even in majors, was going to be a best of 3. So that way, at least in theory, we got better teams in terms of the teams that had lost. We ensured at least a good team out of those ones went to the playoffs. Then we got a situation this year where Dreamhack implemented it, so all the lower bracket matches were best of 3s. So the first game in the lower bracket was a best of 3, then the decider was a best of 3. So in theory, even if an upset happened, you still got at least a best of 3 before you were eliminated, because you either won the best of 1s and you went and played the quarterfinals, or you played a best of 3 in the lower bracket. Now, that format has the exact same number of matches as the format being used now. It's just that they've switched the first losers game from being a best of 3 to a best of 1, and they've changed the winners match from being a best of 1 to a best of 3. Now, personally, I actually like this change, as in a change of what we had before to what we have now. I think this is a positive move. I like the winners match being a best of 3. It means you're going to get far less fluke group winners. I mean, the famous example is MLG Columbus, where the Fnatic team that had won 6 tournaments in a row lost the winners match to Team Liquid in a close game on, I think it was Dust 2. And if you go back and listen to my interview with Hiko, he even says, like, at that tournament, the randomizer and other elements basically allowed that result to happen. It's far less likely it would have happened in a full best of 3. But hey, if it had, and they'd won a full best of 3, that also would have been more convincing for Team Liquid. So it would have solved a lot of those issues. The problem with having fluke winners of groups, or much more variance in who wins groups, is it fucks up the bracket. Because in these formats, first place in a group plays a second place in a group. So you're going to end up with a lot more times where there's an upset in the winners match, and then perhaps the number 1 and the number 2 teams end up playing each other in the first round of the quarterfinals, or on the same side of the bracket, much more likely. That's actually more of an issue, because then the winners match result is having an impact on the whole rest of the tournament. It's not just impacting who gets out of the group, it's now impacting who will play who in the brackets, when teams will play, and so one little best of 1 upset there can have a massive effect on essentially spoiling the rest of the tournament if you want to see the best games and really evenly matched high-level teams playing each other as in the rest of the tournament and not having an overly stacked bracket. So personally, that's the reason why I love the winners match being a best of 3. I also think it's quite cool that this format gets all the best of 1s out of the way at the beginning, and then the rest of the tournament is best of 3 the whole way out. So you already get into a sort of playoff mode. And for me, best of 3 is real Counter-Strike. Best of 1, it's got some similarities to what I call real Counter-Strike, but it's not in the same way, especially because we know best of 1s have more likely to have upsets because you ban out the 6 maps and there's only the 1 remaining. So you're never going to, in theory, have to play a weak map if you're a lesser team often. Now, also, this means we get more best of 3s in the tournament. Not from past Dreamhacks, but from old GSL system. Because now we'll have 11 best of 3s in these tournaments, assuming the final isn't a best of 5. That means the winner of the tournament has to play a winner has to play 4 best of 3s. Now that's really cool because it means that if someone somehow flukes the event, yeah, they could still sometimes get an easy bracket, or they could maybe have one good result over a good team and win. But there's so many matches to play that is so much less likely to happen. And whoever wins the tournament is going to show as a big body of work. They've played a lot of games, a lot of different opponents, and if you can win 4 best of 3s, that's pretty impressive no matter who you are. Now the minimum amount of maps you can play to win the tournament is 9, whereas before it was 8, so we improved that as well. Now, I understand the losers match being a best of 1, the first game between the losers, means that a team in every group will go out of the tournament after losing just 2 best of 1s. And I can understand why people don't like this. This is one of the first things that pros complained about. And then, as a result, we had switches in formats. So I've complained about it myself in the past when all of the GSL system used to be best of 1s, because that's one of the reasons why teams like Titan could go out of a tournament after just losing 2 best of 1s, when sometimes they were a favourite coming into the tournament back in the days when they had Shocks or Kenny S. But instead they went out in some of those major groups, in part because of best of 1s. I agree best of 1s are not as good as best of 3s. And that's why when players started to really make a fuss about this, we had the Swiss system get implemented. We had the return of round robin at tournaments like EPL, IEM. We had Dreamhack implement a lower bracket best of 3. I get that it sucks. The problem is, it's not, first of all, it's not as much of an issue that you're going to have a good team go out, because if you seed the groups properly, you have a proper distribution of the top teams, it's very unlikely that you're going to get these elite level teams who actually lose the 2 best of 1s. And I have to say, that's something where you've got to give Dreamhack props for this tournament. They did a fantastic job of seeding this tournament and making sure the groups were evenly distributed. And that's with the off-season of all the crazy roster moves, which meant some of the names of the teams are better than some of the lineups. So, for example, Gambit's name looks a lot better because they won the major than the actual lineup does without Zeus. Vice versa, you go. Fnatic still feels like a good team, right? But they've got a very new lineup. I think they did an amazing job of seeding this tournament. And this really shows how you need people who are commissioners and who are going to make the hard choices and not just go off one tournament like the majors do, or no tournaments. Now then, or online play for that matter. I get that it sucks for the teams, even if they're bad teams though, that they just go out after only 2 best of 1s. The problem is this: I don't really care, relative to the rest of the tournament, if the people who get the most hard done by are losers, are the worst teams in the tournament. Because these are only the teams that go out in last place in this tournament, get put in this bad situation where they play only the 2 best of 1s. These are the teams I care about the least, especially within this format, this many games, if it means I can emphasize and put more focus and make a better route for the top teams who are going to go deeper in the tournament, play in the bracket and have a better bracket. I'll give up these bad teams having just only 2 games instead of 3, for example, in a Swiss system before they go out of the tournament. I don't think that's a bad trade to make overall. I will say that this is overall a better format than Swiss system in my opinion. I agree for the losing teams it's not, because they only get to play 2 games instead of 3, but because of the best of 3s I like it more. Because think about ESL World Cologne. NIP only had to win on 1 map in that tournament, Inferno, and they got to the playoffs, thanks to it being a Swiss system and the reseeding issue. In this kind of a format, I will absolutely trade losers having a bad time for winners sometimes getting wonky results because of best of 1s or not winning the group, even though they perhaps are the best team there. You have to understand, yes, if I had a choice, I would say just make every match best of 3. But this is a step-by-step process. You can get tournament organizers to change things if they're very small changes. They will implement some of those. Like this one, we got them to change, if you remember, because when you complained about this and said, oh, I'd rather the winners match was the best of 3, what you're saying to the organizer is, no, you can keep the same exact logistics, the same schedule, you can have the same amount of games, you don't have to change anything that can impact your budget or how you've planned your event. Just change this little tweak and we think this is better. And guess what? They're on board with that, and hence Dreamhack Masters has made this change. They'll be one of the first ones to come forwards with it. I've learned over the years, while I am an idealist, and I think from day one you should change things to be the best format you can, and then I hope that fans will adjust to it and adapt to it over time, I understand that when you actually deal with the people who do these tournaments, they're more pragmatic. They're more wanting to change things based on like small tweaks that they can try out, and then they can see it works, and they can see that all parties enjoy it. Because, for example, maybe a tournament organizer would say, not only do I have to logistically make more days and more matches if I make every game a best of 3, but also maybe then there'll be viewer fatigue. Maybe viewers won't watch all of a best of 3 between 2 losers teams if one of them's really good and one's really bad. Maybe I'll have less viewing figures as a result. I mean, there'll be more games, so I think you could offset it that way, but you never know the way these people are thinking in terms of how they try to keep retention of viewers on the stream. Also, will people want to watch losers matches in every tournament? Not just tier 1 tournaments, but in tier 2 and tier 3 tournaments. Will that not have viewer fatigue? I don't know. You could certainly make a case. I could see how orgs might make that case. So here's the thing. Personally, yes, I'd rather we just made all the matches best of 3 in GSL, and then we got rid of this issue, and even the losers play 2 best of 3s before they go out of the tournament. But I also think beyond the logistic issues of having to add more time, more days, viewers having to watch more games, I would also say it should depend on the tournament. Like if you're talking about a major and we're going to use GSL, yes, make every match best of 3 in the group stage. Let's have this be the World Championship. Have these the best possible games. Make it hard to get out of the group. So if you get out as the 4th best team in a group, fucking well played to you. You had to win a minimum of 2 best of 3s. Perhaps maybe even win. Let me think. No, it would always have to be 2 best of 3s, wouldn't it? Yes, it would always have to be. But what I will say is this. So majors, obviously. Tier 1 tournaments. Yeah, I'd say most, probably if you're using GSL, should be best of 3 format. So I'd say yes. Dreamhack Masters, that's tier 1. That's among the top 10 tournaments of the year. Probably top 5 in some cases. This tournament's along with the majors. Yeah, make those best of 3. But once you get beyond that, once you're using tournaments that are good, but they're not necessarily the biggest tournaments, do we have to have, like, for example, 10 tournaments in a year where it's best of 3 all the time in the GSL? Do we have to use GSL and best of 3 in all 10 tournaments or whatever? I don't know. And once we go beyond that, I'm certainly open to the idea of some smaller tournaments still having a best of 1 losers match. Does it matter if you go out of a small tournament in a best of 1 losers match? It's not really that big a deal, is it? I agree for the bigger ones in the tier 1, and it's my ideal format, but I can give something to the tournament and say, okay, logistically, you don't have to put on an event that's 6 days long if you're running a smaller tournament that only has, like, say, 80k for first place or 125k. Sure, that's not as big a deal at that point in time, and it's a lesser tournament. You can try different formats. You can do a quicker format if you want, and sometimes perhaps that'll be less fatigue for viewers when they complain about oversaturation. So I agree it's not ideal, but the reason why I say it's a dilemma is because within this logistical set of parameters, we have to make a choice. And the choice in the past was to emphasize the losers and let them play a best of 3. I say no, emphasize the winners. Let's have the winners match be a best of 3. Let's have great playoff brackets. And then, sorry to the losers, I know it sucks, but you were among the worst teams in the tournament. You've come last place. I'm sorry, I don't have as much sympathy for you. I'd like it to be best of 3 in an ideal world, but if I have to choose, if there's a dilemma before me, I'll prioritize the winners and making the brackets good over the losers, the teams that are coming last place.
Hi, this is Spencer Hiko Martin.